Hey guys, Greg here at the Vinyl Rundown, and done some soul searching and come to the conclusion that it's okay to buy cheap records. In fact, it might be a moral imperative that we should buy cheap records. Crappy records, not necessarily, but cheap records. Well, let me give you the logic behind this. So, I've been called out, criticized for buying a lot of cheap records. Not to say I don't buy some nice records, but I'm always looking for the bargain. And I think the sweet spot is really the really inexpensive $1, $2. The $10 seems to be a losing proposition, but the $20, $30 where you're buying halfway decent records, 20, 30 bucks and up. But I find myself in thrift shops and record stores that have bargain bins, and I'm always looking for the new arrival bin and the jazz bin and the bargain bin, which might be $1 or $2 in some stores, might be $4 or $5 in other stores. By the way, here in Los Angeles, the Goodwill now charges $3.99 and $4.99 for records that are complete junk that aren't even worth a quarter. Record stores would throw away or put out in a free bin. So the fact that some record stores are still doing nice bargain bins for $1 or $2. Where's the record I was going to show you? Here it is. Okay. So the imperative to buy the cheap records is because it's a no-risk exploration. Okay? It's a chance to experiment on something, try something new, take a gamble. It's a low-cost gamble, a low-risk gamble, right? You're not going to walk into a store, maybe you are, but are you going to really spend $20 or $30 or $40 on a record where you haven't heard of the artist, you haven't heard the music, you have not seen a review of it? It's a complete blind buy. Okay, a complete blind buy. Are you going to do that? So for $1 or $2, you can take the risk that, hey, this might be something interesting. And then you get it home, at least I do. And I do a little research, and I learn about, look it up on Wikipedia, and I learn a little something of history. So my old-fashioned way of looking at record collecting is it's a part of connecting us to the older history of music. And maybe I'm a weirdo, okay? I buy that. So I was in a store the other day, and I had 15 minutes only. The store opened at 12. I went there at 10. They were closed, so they opened till 10. Open at 12. And then, I had to pick somebody up at 12:15. So I literally came back to the store and I had 15 minutes. And to me, that's not much time at all. So in the bargain bin, what do I find? Who's that guy? Elvin Jones. Okay, again, I don't have much time. Elvin Jones for $1. It's Blue Note. It's playable. It's not too scratched. I'm buying it. No idea what it is. I had a good feeling that it was probably a late 70s, early 80s funk, DX7 synthesizer, soul BS. I figured this is going to be terrible, but I was pleasantly surprised that it's not. It's not terrible, but there's no information on the record. You can barely see that it says merry-go-round. It's written in really hard to read type. Elvin Jones, the great jazz drummer. If you don't know who this is, we can do this. We can do the face, or we can do the teeth. We can go face or teeth. Yeah, that's hilarious, Greg. And there's song titles on the bottom, which I can barely read, and there's no information about who the players are. And it is that weird 70s Blue Note label that's not it's that weird goofy Blue Note label. It was only done for a few years. So it's called Merry-Go-Round, if I didn't mention that already. And the players on here are phenomenal. It's got Jan Hammer, Chick Corea, Al Foster, Steve Grossman on sax. I'm probably missing somebody. It's got a bunch of great players on here. The one dud on here is a song written by his wife, Keiko, who wrote the title track. One of the worst songs I've ever heard, but you gotta let your wife get a song in there once in a while. Anyway, why is this in the dollar bin? Well, someone took the liberty of writing on it with a ballpoint pen. And I don't know if you can see that. So, side 2 has a problem. Side 1 is fine. Most of side 2 is fine. And this is much cooler music than I was expecting. It's like, this is 1971, 72, so it's coming out of sort of modal jazz, spiritual jazz, and it's got a little R&B funk aspect to it. But the fact that I found this for $1, I'm very, very satisfied, you know. It's again, I gambled and I won, okay? Same record store, same day. If I ever see anything by this guy for a few bucks, I'm going to buy Slim Gaillard. Do you know who Slim Gaillard is? He is this sort of what's the word? The clown of the bebop era. He is mostly known for novelty and funny music, but he was one of the more talented multi-instrumentalists of the bebop era. Slim Gaillard played sax, guitar, vibes, piano. He played upside down piano just as a joke. But he wrote all these funny, goofy songs, you know, Flat Foot Flugee, Chicken Rhythm, Mean Mama Blues. He wrote most of his songs. And so anything that he recorded, well, not anything, but all of this stuff is from the 40s, so it was originally on 78 RPM. So, you know, again, I had only 15 minutes, saw this for $1, grabbed it. It's a little beat up, it's a little scratched up, but it's playable. It's just got some ticks and pops. But I get it home, I didn't even read the back in the store. I get it home and it says, 1945, side 1, Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet. Charlie Parker on sax. Dodo Mamarosa on piano, who I've talked about on the channel. Zutty Singleton on drums. So Slim Gaillard played with Charlie Parker. Okay, he played multi-instruments. He plays vibes on this. This is one of those cheesy reissue labels, but I have some of his original stuff on 78 RPM. I have, I think, 4 of them, but a nice collection. But for $1, check out Slim Gaillard. He usually is with Slim and Slam Stewart on bass. This is Bam Brown on bass. This big giant guy is Bam Brown. So Slim and Slam, or Slim and Bam, or Slim and Charlie Parker. Okay, from the same outing, this record is actually in very good condition. Again, I knew nothing about it, but for $1, I'm willing to give it a try. A jazz group playing Bach. Okay, that's probably corny. It sounds corny and goofy, right? Well, Jacques Loussier, I didn't really know who that is, but Pierre Michelot on bass. Pierre Michelot is like one of the top European French bass players. He played on the Miles Davis. He played on a bunch of records by Chet Baker. He is a super well-established bass player who happens to be French from that era. So this record sounds great. The vinyl is fine. The playing is interesting. It's more interesting than I thought. It's not super corny. And great bass player on here. So, and they had like volumes 1 through 5. I'm going to grab 1. Same record store, but an earlier visit from a few weeks ago. So this for $1. Had to have it. Hiram Bullock. Do you know who that is? And Hiram Bullock is somebody I've kind of known and loved, but didn't have any of his albums. Hiram Bullock was known as the first guitar player on the David Letterman show. Back when I was just starting college, we would watch Late Night with David Letterman, and Hiram was always up for some antics. He always showed up with no shoes on, seemed to annoy Letterman. He also annoyed Letterman by being late and absent a lot, because it turns out he was a bit of a heroin user. He played a really cool beat-up Strat, and he came into the Letterman band because of Will Lee. Will Lee's the bass player on Letterman. Will Lee's father was kind of the creator of this great music program in Florida. I want to say University of Miami. And it was like, probably still is one of the premier jazz, what they call studio jazz schools in the country. So you had Hiram on guitar and Will Lee on bass as a team. The other team that came out of there was Jaco Pastorius and Pat Metheny. That's where they met. So all these guys were buddies. So this record, it's not that good. It's very much a bunch of his buddies play on here, and it's got a very 80s overproduced sound. But for $1, I'm willing to try it out. He's got another record with a killer version of Hendrix's Little Wing. He's very much sort of Hendrixy, but more jazzier. So, unfortunately, he got sick, died of esophageal cancer, maybe. If you look at pictures of him later in his life, in his 40s and 50s, he blew up to be hundreds of pounds. And a sad ending, but he played on a bazillion records as a studio guitar player. So, Hiram Bullock. Bought it just so I could have something by him in the collection again for $1. That's my kind of record. I got more expensive records, but this particular episode, I think we're looking at some of the cheapies. This morning, I was going to sit down and read on a Saturday morning, and I wanted a record that I could sit down and read to. I put on a couple records that just didn't give me the vibe, then I grabbed this. For $1, the Modern Jazz Quartet at the Music Inn, Volume 2, with Sonny Rollins, has a 99-cent sticker, but because of this store, I usually get their stuff when they're a quarter. So I probably spent $0.25 on this record. It's in fine shape. It is a reissue. It is missing the original cover, but it's like backgroundy, cocktaily music, and it was just perfect for the mood I was trying to set this morning with me and my wife. Just kicking back with some coffee and reading. Yeah, sometimes I read books, not too often, but I showed you this last week probably. This was $3. Gene Krupa, Jazz at the Philharmonic. And when I first got it, I concluded it was unplayable. Turns out side 1 is horrible and unplayable, but side 2 is more or less okay, whichever side is which. Look at that old label. Gene Krupa, I bought it for the cover, David Stone Martin. I cleaned it really thoroughly, like scrub brush. And side 2, turns out it plays okay. Now, I have some crappy record players, too. So, crappy records belong on crappy record players. A, because you're not ruining a needle. And B, because they're not going to dig in. They're going to kind of mask some of the noise with maybe a conical needle instead of a nicer thin line needle. Okay. This is a crappy record that I bought that I'm not happy with because I thought it was a good record. ECM record for $10. ECM, Miroslav Vitu, great bass player, played with Weather Report before Jacques, I think. John Sermon on reeds, John Christensen on drums, Kenny Kirkland on piano. Again, I only had 15 minutes to shop at the store. I got in and out quickly, and I did not realize that this is a Brazilian pressing. Brazil presses records? Yeah, I guess so. ECM records are usually pristine because they're German pressings. This came with a paper sleeve instead of plastic, which I threw away because it was moldy and disgusting. I really cleaned this hard, and it's still full of pops. So, unhappy with this. The music is probably good, but again, I was in a hurry. I didn't look carefully. And the lighting in the record store is just not going to show up what's going to show up on like my nice like LED tabletop lamps that I have. So one loser so far. There may be other losers. Okay, 2 more records. 2 records side by side. One was $3, 2 records set by Lester Young, and one was in the free pile. No, maybe it was in the 50-cent pile. Let's call it 50 cents. And I call these companion pieces. Did I show you these records before? I don't think I did. Billie Holiday, the great Billie Holiday. Strange Fruit is like her signature song, and because it is a song about hangings, lynchings. Columbia did not want to release it, so another record label called Comet released it, and this is, of course, it was released in '78, so this is a compilation of stuff that she did a long time ago. Came out on LP. Hey, it's on Atlantic. I guess it's licensed from Comet. I don't know. It's kind of beat up, but again, for the historical significance of the song Strange Fruit, cleaned it up good, and it sounds okay. What does it have to do with Lester Young? Lester Young, the greatest sort of pre-bop sax player, coming out of the swing era, played with the Count Basie band, and just a massive influence on most sax players, but most of his career was on '78. So these are, again, there's a lot of stuff in this video that was done on '78 and then re-released later on LP. Lester Young, series. This is got numbers, I thought, right? Numbers? Volume 4. I have 2 or 3 of these. Usually you can get them for $5 or $8, but for $3 for a 2-record set, and these two are good friends. Were they more than friends? Well, they lived together for a while, but rumor has it they were just friends, but Billie Holiday came up with the nickname Prez for Lester Young, the president of jazz. And Lester Young came up with Lady Day. So these two are like connected at the hip, let's say, in the history of jazz. So buy those cheap records and do your historical research on who those people are and what their significance is in music. Next time I'll show you some nicer, more expensive records. Okay, guys? Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.